Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here is like in the Matthew Birth St. Joseph's Hospital right here. This right here will be a sketch right here I went do right here of like this was like a hospital room right here with my mom and dad both, and have right here was me whenever I was very young. I like it have right there is my baby. It's like this was right here was me whenever I was a baby, and if anybody were warned to where that yeah that. For any, and I kept thinking about as to where that, any type of sketches or if it's going to be any type of colorings, done by crayon or pencils or anything like that, that people weren't, to where that, yeah, can you actually draw out, anything that maybe that for what you can assume, and as well as, for anything that maybe for based on from what you can remember especially. And whenever I was looking up about St. Joseph's Hospital, I was also thinking about as to where yeah nowadays since they got a lot of that online sites such as to where that look them up for where they're located as well as for any type of medical history as well for any medical words. And I know that I know with like anybody, especially if they're studying for like nursing or doctor's degrees or anything like that, that they're like wanting to where that based on for their kids, they whenever they give birth to their kids and knowing about the types of information that they would like to have based on from what the hospital found out especially. But you see right here is that this right here would be what you call like a sketch that I would have put together right here with my parents right here. And you see right here is this right here would be me whenever I was young. And so I kind of look at this right here is like it kind of like I don't know if what we call secretly, but it's like what you call like a kind of like a reconstruction of like what you call but for like drawing out from what I assume and for what I can remember based on looking at some photographs. And I know from the photographs I can remember looking at back whenever I was very young and just kind of get myself some ideas about what happened during that time. Right on, for like if it was when that early Wednesday morning or so that on July 18th of 1984, and like for whenever my parents like whenever they went to the hospital when when they're during the time that I was delivered especially. But you see right here is that the way I would do this right here is almost like if I were to be right there, while looking at the, if it's going to be the husband and the wife, and then if they would be laying right here on the hospital bed, and as well as the doctors and as well as the nurses, that if they would be what you call taking a test, as well as have a connect the person to an IV, and as well as getting give them any antibiotics or anything like that, anything that they need to have before that they actually are ready to deliver. And I know nowadays with the hospitals nowadays that like that some if anybody were warned where I'd like see any more details right here, this right here, yeah, if anybody were warned to where that back in the like early 1980s that in the hospital rooms that they would have had maybe maybe a TV or I don't even know what all like the all the beds and as well as that if there was like a step stool or anything like any type of chair or anything like that that folds out. So if anybody were to remember is like what the hospital rooms looked like back then, and these of course even if I had any images right here around as to worth for any ideas for what it looked like around the room. But I'm sure anybody probably say that yeah, the parents or anybody whoever that was there, a friend of yours would probably say as to where what all it looked like and what was going on necessarily. So this right here may not include everything based on for any stories that we want to talk about, especially as to where like this right here is supposed to show right here with me right here on a day whenever I was born, and think about as to where that I keep thinking about as to where anybody that may want to, or like the parents, for how proud the parents would be as to where they have that the son or daughter or anybody that yeah that's them right there whenever they were very young, that they've only been about that yeah that what do you call that for whenever a child that was born about an hour or two ago, something like that, maybe 5 hours ago, and if they are very if they are a newborn, and think about as to where that the time for whenever that the kid was born, and think about for what you were wearing, and as well as that if you were born right around the early morning as of 8 a.m. and you're like thinking about as to where that yeah that if it's going to be whoever that was there that offered you the offered the parents maybe something to eat and it's like for lunch or anything like that. So I know that this right here, that if this was right here was my mom, and she would be like, say, half out of it whenever she was, it's like, in a delivery room, and then you have right here, is like, if this was right here was my dad right here, and it's like with the doctors right here, and the doctors would come in, at times and check up on the parents and think about us to where that based on my stories toward it, yeah, that for any medical problems especially, and I know over at St. Joseph's Hospital, it's like it would have been the hospital for where I was born. So you're like, think about it to where, based on the picture though that I got, it is, and then know about for any other medical records, especially medical records that take place from as early as as of 1990, something like that, about 1989, and think about as to where any medical records that more likely that we were able to, that I was able to keep also. But these right here will be like sketches right here, and if anybody were warned to where that whenever Matthew, whenever he was in kindergarten or so, that he would get into, take the crayons and as well as the pencils and anything creative, and he would just, what you say is like, think about he would just start drawing something and then just kind of think about if that looks pretty close to what he's trying to draw. So while I was drawing this, I was also thinking about as to where for what looks good in this sketch right here is trying to draw my mom if she were to be what you call laying in the hospital bed right here, and then you have right here my dad is like with me right here, and this right here would be what you call like a type of a moment where I'm sure parents will probably say is to where like an hello, little fella. Hello, little fella. But on the other hand, that for most of us who have seen from the pictures from my birthday, from my first birthday, as well as from whenever I was in like in the 5th grade or so, I'm sure that most of us would probably like to maybe see some of this right here. That these sketches I went and came up with right here is that showing right here is like for like hospital bed, and I know that if anybody were warned to wear that, yeah, go ahead and select like the layer. But anyway, but if I can go ahead and maybe just add a little bit of a color of green right here, like for Photoshop, some of my Photoshop work right here. But I know that for maybe any pictures that we were able to keep from over the years, or if we don't have any pictures at all, and just kind of think about as to where like that, if anybody, any parents that, maybe if they could explain about, from whatever happened, during that night, from that morning or so, whenever a child was born, and think about what the doctors were doing necessarily about, for how they were handling it to where after the parents give birth to a child, and then whenever they were placed in an incubator, in which if anybody were warned, where how come you didn't include the sketches of the incubator? And but I was also thinking about it to where if I want to go ahead and use some sketches, draw some sketches of like of the hospital. It's like basically on the St. Joseph's Hospital. That I was thinking about that nowadays that for like if you go to the actual website and then actually look it up about St. Joseph's Hospital and St. Charles and be able to look up details information about that, and you're like warned to where that any pictures that maybe that they may have or like anything that could be on file as well. But on the other hand, that we may warrant to where that yeah, that any doctors that were there that were working there during that time, if some of them are still there, or maybe some of them have been if they're either retired or they were transferred to another clinic or some sort. But I'm sure, like with anybody, that whenever they're born, that they're like weren't toward anything that such as anything that they were diagnosed with. It's like besides for borderline, or if it's going to be anything related to like any other type of disorder or something like that. And some of those doctors and nurses that more likely that back then that I guess that they had like maybe the medical books, or maybe the systems that they were able to look up the information on their systems as well. But these right here would be examples right here of doctors, and the doctors that would be caused to where that I'm not sure whatever happened during that time, because if anybody knows, it's like yeah that I was too young really to remember about when all that happened during this time, and think of like to where it seems like to where for anybody who's more likely going to have like if they look at their pictures, at their baby pictures, and they're like warned to where that that nearly 25 years ago, or maybe if it was like 33 years ago or 40 years ago, and they're just trying to pick up about his tour, that, for anybody like an artist like me that would be able to maybe kind of draw out some ideas about possibly about whatever happened during that time, also about from whenever that a lady, a mom, the parents, whenever they go to the hospital and they are delivered like a they are brought into a delivery room, and as well as that from whenever the child was born, and then the pictures that were taken, as well as talking to the nurses and the doctors. And if this was right here, this example right here of me right here, and anybody that they weren't, where they, yeah, it looks, look, you're pretty tiny, which I'm like, that, yeah, I was drawing this. It's like if my parents were to be holding me in like a type of way, if I were to be wrapped up in a baby blanket right here, and if my mom were to be what you call it, laying in that hospital bed right there, and like wondering to her by the time that she was able to see me as well, and if I can remember right, my parents, that they would have taken me to the hospital about 13 years later. So it was about 13 years later. I can remember going to the hospital, and they say that since then that they either remodeled or they renovated, like a lot of the part of the hospital to where a lot of different sections or so of the hospital in different areas, and were for maybe the incubators that may be in the same similar spot, but then they may repaint it and it's like refurnished a lot of the rooms and specialties. So it's like you're like Warren to where that you talk to the nurses, and sometimes that 13 years later, and it's like somebody that tells them, yeah, I'm showing my kids around, and that we're trying to tell them about from whenever they part where that the rooms from where they were delivered. And as they say, well, that quite a bit has changed, since then. So you're like Warren Tour that whenever how do we explain to our children about his tour that whenever a child was born, in a hospital, or let's just say other people that may say is that they have their own stories too, as to where how to explain as to where that whenever a child is born, and think about you have to take them to a location, and talk about as to where that I even hear about even on the news about to where any kids that are born and who are even twins or triplets, some of them are even conjoined twins, and so that a lot of the hospitals that may show that to where that maybe if a child were to like have any type of birth, if they were born with maybe an extra arm or anything like that, but let's just say that for any type of birthing birthing moments, is to where that I'm sure like doctors can likely say is to where that based on my story compared to other stories is like one to where that whenever a child is born, is especially at the hospital, and any parents that may say is to where some questions that may go by is to where that were you able to bring the child home that night or that day or so, or maybe if the child had stay in the hospital for about 4 or 5 more days or so, because like they keep an eye on them and giving them the nutrients that they needed, and doing working tests or anything like that. But on the other hand, you have right here these doctors right here, and if anybody wonders as to where that I got the green that selected right here, but I'll just go ahead and put this right here in green. If these were like surgical masks right here, so if the doctors were to be wearing any kind of mask, and with any kind of clothing that they could have been wearing especially. But this activity right here, my mainly will talk about right here, I talk about for the St. Joseph's Hospital. So if anybody has heard of it, or if they've been there before and like Warren Tour, that maybe getting some examples, images maybe from Google Map or so. But if we would actually look right here, that I would sketch right here, are just some ideas about as to where that this, of course, would have been taking place back in 1984. So since then, I guess St. Joseph's Hospital, I guess that they probably gotten a lot of renovated a lot of the building, maybe add a few more rooms and maybe more staff and more doctors' offices and maybe X-ray centers or anything like that. So if anybody wonders as to where that a lot of the few things I'm sure that have changed as well. Maybe Look, one thing that maybe that about the hospital that maybe has not changed, or if it's never changed, it's really about it's like to is it still called you say the St. Joseph's Hospital, or if it's the St. Joseph's Clinic, clinic east or west or so side of the side of town or something like that. So anybody that may wonder to where yeah that you for what place what location you for what hospital that you were born at necessarily, and you're like wondering to where the doctors and staff that were there especially, but you see right here, this right here will be example right here of a female doctor, and then this right here will be example right here of a male doctor, and there could be maybe a few nurses there, and then maybe a specialist, or if it's anybody else. It's like that I know whenever you have staff there working there at the hospital, and some of them that work in different departments, it's like different areas, say of the clinic, and then they tell you about who they are in the sleigh, and like somebody who could be working maybe in the eye center, maybe in the X-ray center. So I keep thinking though that yeah that especially like the medical tools that they would have had during that time is to where that for understanding the whole purpose about the story especially, but you see right here is this right here, this was right here was me right here wrapped up in a baby blanket, and it's like if my parents were to be holding me, and thinking about as to where they had me on an incubator at times also, and this right here that I show anybody that yeah that I of course would have been probably too young really to know about what was going on, as to where if there was any pictures taken, or if there was any anybody talking in the background about what was going on, and then how's everybody doing, and then so that's just the thing, though, is to where whenever we look at these moments, from the hospital, from St. Joseph's Hospital, as well as for Matthew's birth, is that have right here is me right here, and if anybody wanted to where that this was an actual picture right here, and think about what do you think about that? Like, well, at least that maybe I would know a little bit of details about what went on during that time, and like with any kids that whenever they were young, that they may have heard that story a number of times as to where that they had problems, or that they would have had, say, during birth, that depend on what the weather was like during that time too. So the amount of birthday parties that I may have had during those years ago, and just think about as to where that really that the parents would probably like to look forward to seeing as to where the child that they give birth to is to where that they do well in school, and they get a good paying job, and as well as that they grow up and knowing about it for whenever they do grow up, and knowing about the type of career and study that they wind up getting as well. So whenever we think about this right here is that whenever I sketch this right here, I keep thinking about as to where while I'm sketching it, this was right here was an example right here what the hospital room would look like, and any ideas that maybe I can think of especially, and if anybody were warned to where that any more ideas I can maybe think about later on. But one of the ideas I did want to use especially was talk about the hospital, about St. Joseph's Hospital. But anyway, they were talking about right here from Matthew's birth, like so taught us St. Joseph's Hospital for 1984, and right here's the parents as well as the doctors right here, May 25, and on the other hand, I talk about is like for you just kind of piece together some ideas about anything from what we would assume about what the hospital room would look like, and anything that was going on during that time also. So that's another reason as to why while I was working on these sketches right here is that this right here would be me right here, and if anybody wanted to where me right there, and if I could maybe use a little bit of the zoom tool right here. So you have right here is a zoom tool right here, and I'll go ahead and move this around just a little bit, but use the zoom tool just to kind of zoom in right here. If that was right there was me right there, and as well as you have right here is like with my mom, is like the parents right there, and it's like with the doctors. So if this was right here, if anybody say that this was right here was the main focus right here, as to where whenever a child is born, and then thinking necessarily to where that, yeah, that's you, oh, that cute little fella. And then this one right here will be what you call is like that. That's, you know, the dad, and it's like this right here would be the mom right here, and she would be like resting, sleeping on the hospital bed. So if anybody wonders as to where the, yeah, that anything based on what you call is like a, go ahead and try to zoom out here too. But anyway, but there you have it. Talk about, say, for the St. Joseph's Hospital, and say for the drawing, as like for the drawing that I went ahead and put together right here. But other than that, you're May 25, and thanks for watching. Have a great